Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you who are on the East Coast, and good morning for those of you who are further west. Welcome to the joint webinar hosted by the American Public Human Services Association and its affiliate, the National Association of State Child Care Administrators, and our industry partner, Social Solutions. My name is Rashida Brown, and I am a Senior Policy Associate at APHSA, and I also am Staff Liaison to our Child Care and Public Welfare Attorneys affiliate. We are joined today by experts who will discuss government and how government and non-government entities can better collaborate on efforts to improve student achievement through Rapid+Time collaboration. We are joined today by Laura Henson of Metro Nashville's Public Schools and Pierre Thomas of Tennessee's Department of Children's Services. And we are also joined today by Adrienne Bordone of Social Solutions, who will discuss in detail how Metro Nashville's public schools and Promise Neighborhoods came together in this unique data sharing partnership, and will also share why this partnership has been so successful. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm sure that everybody on this webinar knows that effective and high-quality data use and cross-systems collaboration can lead to improved outcomes. And this is something that APHSA and its affiliates has been promoting through its Pathways initiative, which calls for a transformative and integrated health and human service systems, and also interoperable information systems. And at APHSA, we have strengthened our efforts through our Executive Director, Tracy Waring, to reach out to other federal partners and private stakeholders and other agencies like education and transportation and housing and Homeland Security, and with foundations and other industry partners and federal policymakers to bring everybody together at one table to discuss ways where we can better improve the services for children and families who come to our front door. And these systems need to be more effective and more modernized for our families to better navigate these services, and our systems need to be speaking with one another so we have a better sense of what's happening in our communities and with our children being educated by our public schools. And we're thankful to have some of our federal partners on the line today who have been involved in Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge and Promise Neighborhoods and the President's Social Innovation Fund and other initiatives emphasizing the measurement of outcomes and managing performance and concentrating on shared funding and all of the innovative things that comes out of that collaborative work. So just to let everybody know, we will have some time at the end of this webinar for questions and answers and an interactive discussion among persons on the line. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have Laura Henson, who serves as the Director for Information Management and Decision Support for Metro Nashville Public Schools. Prior to taking on this position, Laura spent 2.5 years as a part of the Mayor's office tasked with managing projects in support of the Mayor's education agenda and serving as coordinator for Nashville's Child and Youth Master Plan. She also chairs the MNPS Technology and Data Transformational Leadership Group and the Nashville Promise Neighborhoods Data Working Group. We are also joined by Pierre Thomas, who serves as the education consultant to the Tennessee Department of Children's Services for 7 years, with particular focus on issues related to juvenile justice programming and training. And he also has more than 2 decades worth of experience in the field of education from school districts in Tennessee and in New York. And also Adrienne Bordone is joined here today from Social Solutions, who is a former middle school teacher and nonprofit executive who co-founded Social Solutions in 2000. Today he leads Social Solutions Public Sector's Interoperability and Evidence-Based Practice Team, and Adrienne has a hand in Social Solutions' successes with such outcome-oriented agencies and initiatives such as the Harlem Children's Zone and Nurse Family Partnerships in Metro Nashville Public Schools. So I'm going to pitch it over to Adrienne, and thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, Rashida. Like most of us on today's call, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and learn from some of our industry experts here today, Laura and Pierre specifically. I really hope that we'll be able to foster some Q&A through the chat, which we'll be monitoring. So please take advantage of that through these presentations. We'll take some time to pause between presentations and respond to particular questions, and then have a Q&A at the conclusion of the discussion today. So most of us are here today recognizing that poverty is a contagion that affects families, generations, and communities around the country. We also know that there's a detrimental impact that poverty has on the social and emotional determinants of academic success. Academic achievement is central to any poverty reduction strategy, and Social Solutions is proud to support this work around the country. Today we're going to learn how two federally sponsored initiatives, the U.S. Department of Education's Promised Neighborhood Initiative and Health and Human Services Uninterrupted Scholars Act, are helping to drive innovative, interoperable strategies and database decision-making in Nashville. Hopefully you'll be able to take some lessons from Nashville and bring them back to your community, or contribute some lessons that you've learned to the community of practice that we have on the phone on this webinar today. Ultimately, we know that we're the first generation of practitioners and leaders who are seeking to use technology to increase business intelligence about what works. We know we're catching up and constrained by budget limits, high visibility, and low-risk thresholds in the communities we serve. I'm thrilled to be able to welcome our presenters today who are really working at the front lines, bridging the gap between thought leadership and practice leadership. Without further ado, Laura, if you'd take it away.
Okay, great. Chris, you want to go to the first slide? I want to thank Adrienne and Rashida both for having me today, and thank you all who are on the call for being here and listening. We're going to get the first slide, Chris? There we go. Thank you. One of the things I get asked all the time, why is a school district interested in data sharing? Typically, school districts are very siloed, and because of FERPA, we keep our information to ourselves and we don't share a lot of it. My answer to this is because we have great people and we have great organizations in our community who are committed to the success of our children and youth. To be anything less than extremely effective with those children and youth is unacceptable. Next. And to achieve their potential, children and youth need personalized, quality, and engaging instruction. The education pipeline is leaking and we are losing students every day. Metro schools and most school districts can't do it alone. If we could, we would have already done it. By using data well at the district level, we can identify students who are not on a path to success before they fall out of the pipeline. Next. But the school district can't do it alone. Quality wraparound services act as insulation for the education pipeline and ensure students come to school ready to learn. To fill this role and inform programming and planning, providers need regular data on the students that they work with. Next. And these providers can't hold the line alone either. We need an entire city that owns outcomes for children and youth. Everyone needs to work together, and this level of coordination requires regular communication and information sharing. The less holes we have, the fewer students are going to slip through the cracks. Next. And what this equates to is a concept called collective impact, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. And what we have here are the 5 conditions of collective success. And this is based on research done by John Kenya and Mark Kramer in 2011 and was published in the Stanford Innovation Journal not long ago. And it's been something that I truly believe in and a lot of the folks that I work with believe in. Collective impact occurs when organizations from different sectors agree to solve a specific social problem together. To achieve any of the 5 conditions of collective success, which are collective agenda, shared measurement system, continuous communication, mutually reinforcing activities, and a good solid backbone support organization, we must be willing to share information. I truly believe that information in the form of data sharing or other information sharing, and sometimes just really good communication, acts as the magnet and the glue for collaboration, which is the starting point for any efforts of this type. Can you go on to the next one? So one of the things I'm going to talk about is data sharing initiative in our Nashville Promised Neighborhood. And this is something we're really, really excited about. Our Nashville Promise neighborhood is a 15-square-mile community that is defined by the boundaries of a cluster in our school district. And we define a cluster as a group of schools and elementary schools that feed to a group of middle schools that all feed to a single high school, very neighborhood-based. In Nashville, our public schools, like I said, are clustered, and there are over 6,000 school-age students in the Nashville Promise neighborhood and about 3,000 children under the age of 5. Our community has a defined target area, it's just shown in purple here on the slide, which is comprised of primarily low-income housing communities, working poor households, and a small section of middle-upper-class households that's kind of carved out there in the slide. There are 12 neighborhood schools, as well as some magnet and charter schools in the footprint of the Nashville Promise neighborhood. Next. So in developing this partnership, you don't go from data sharing, from not knowing someone or not having trust in an organization. So we did need to develop a partnership, the Promise neighborhood and then Metro Public Schools. Promise neighborhood initially received a planning grant, and this actually spurred on a lot of movement. The Promise neighborhood model is very prescriptive and suggestive in what they ask them to do, and there's a lot of great resources that around best practices for planning. And so partners all across the city were very purposely engaged in this work. And data was a specific area of focus, using data to identify trends, but also using data to monitor outcomes. So another aspect of the developing partnership was that knowledge of and the belief in the concept of collective impact was shared across providers. Our school district had previously engaged in a data sharing relationship with an after-school network of providers sponsored out of the mayor's office called the Nashville After School Zone Alliance, and I'll be talking about that briefly in a little bit. So we had a bit of a head start, and we had already kind of delved into the waters and learned a little bit about what it was going to take to share data with community-based organizations. And so this really fed our work once we started really getting involved with the Promise neighborhood and looking at ways where we could deliver student data to those program providers. And we really saw the Promise neighborhood as an opportunity to create a model that was scalable and sustainable. The NASA, the Nashville After School Zone Alliance model, was really based on a partnership directly with the schools, but much more of not just a partnership in sharing data, but actually managing the students who were attending the programs. We used our student information system internally in the school district to actually keep those rosters, and then we would share that out to an external web form where they collect participation data and send it back to us. So there's really around the use of data and the access to that data, our MNPS staff is very involved in that process. We know that that is not scalable. We don't have enough school staff that can address the needs of a large number of program providers. So we saw the utilization of social solutions as a software to deliver the information in a FERPA compliant, secure way as a way to create a secure, scalable, and sustainable model. So on to the next one. So a little bit about what is being shared. I talked a little bit about the NASA, and I'm going to show you the program dashboard that kind of got the intrigue around the data sharing and the kind of illustrated the power of what data could provide to program folks in the community in a minute. But we started off sharing with the NASA folks, but they had access through our data warehouse, through our MNPS staff, like I mentioned. It has an expanded set of data beyond what we're going to be sharing with our Promise neighborhood partners initially, but again, that's because it's managed internally, so we have much more data to be able to work with and provide and create reports on, and I'll show you that in a minute. With the Promise Neighborhood specifically, we're going to be initially sharing demographic information, contact information, and then key indicators of student success. We'll be sharing quarterly grades on an individual student level. There will also be very detailed attendance data and behavior data in the form of the number of in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspension counts. And all of this data will be updated nightly. So we're really looking at a proactive way of our program providers to be able to see that issues with the students they're working with develop. So we need to be able to keep that data updated regularly. There's a potential for additional data to be provided in the future, such as assessment data, but right now we're just trying to keep it as simple as possible for the near term. So I want to go on to the next slide. So this is an example of the data that we currently provide the Nashville After School Zone Alliance. This is not through the Social Solutions platform. Again, this is through our internal data warehouse that these reports are created. And you can see we've got information about unexcused absences, tardies, around daily attendance. We have the top 10 offenses year to date. Now, this is specifically for the students in the program. So we're taking the cohort of students attending that program and just reporting the aggregate results for those particular students. This particular dashboard and the information is drillable, which means all of those numbers you can click on and get actual individual student information. So the list of students, for example, under the DEA, which is our formative benchmark assessments that predict how students will do on our summative state tests, you can see that there are 22 students who are below basic in reading. If I was a program provider, I could ask the school to please provide me a list of those 22 students. And we found that to be very powerful when program providers go to talk to principals. They don't have to go, hey, I'm here to help. They can actually say, I have 22 of your students who are below basic in reading, and I would like to offer some assistance and partner with you. We've had resource sharing and all kinds of things developed from those data conversations, which is very exciting. So this is just an example. You can see the grades at the bottom, and then the Explore test, which this is for middle school students. The After School Zone Alliance deals directly with middle school students. And the Explore summary is part of the ACT suite. So these are projected results on the ACT. And as you can see, we've got a lot of work to do in that area. Go on to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the Promise Neighborhood specifically and the development timeline, because we have a little bit more moving parts because we are working with Social Solutions on the development of the software that will manage this partnership. And how this is going to go, we spent a year before we even really got the technical solution started. We spent a year in MOU development. And that might sound like a lot, but as you are going through things, you find a lot to talk about in a year. It also helped to solidify some of the partnerships. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the details of the MOU development. The technical solution took about 6 months. We are still in the process of that, and we anticipate that we will be piloting that in the upcoming month of August with our new school year, and very excited about that. We've seen some initial development slides, and we're really pleased with the way things are going. I think we're going to have a very solid product that is actually FERPA compliant, which was one of our major concerns when dealing with between school district and partners. Our initial rollout will be during this school year, and we will also be engaging in very deliberate feedback and improvement process. Next. So around the MOU development, we did use the Grand Rapids Master Data Sharing Agreement as a foundation. It was very helpful, and if you can Google that, and they have a whole toolkit there that they have shared, really helped us not recreate the wheel. We didn't use the whole thing. We picked and chose different parts that worked for what we were going to do, but it was a foundational document for us. we made additions and adjustments based on conversations between the Promise neighborhood and the schools folks, and this was ongoing over the year. And that's really, really a wonderful process because it actually helped us realize, just the conversations, we realized what processes we had in place, what we didn't, what we needed to develop. We realized what kind of training we would need, and we needed to identify roles and responsibilities. We needed to talk about parent consent. So it was a very iterative process. So that year of MOU development also had a lot of purpose as far as planning and making sure we had all our bases covered before we start to share data. And a partnership based on trust and mutual development was solidified over this time of intense collaboration and candid discussion. And very last but not least, we engaged lawyers. We actually purposely engaged them at the end of the process. It was a way for us to really get a trust, hash out what we really wanted before we tried to put it into a legal document, and we found that to actually be really good. You know, we didn't need to engage in a bunch of legal speak early on when we're really just trying to define what we wanted to do. So that is a recommendation I would make to anybody. Next. So around the technical solution development, the requirements gathering process is very important, and the technical team learns what they are getting into, which is a lot, and that changes over time. As requirements, they'll roll something out, and the technical team creates what they think they heard, and then, of course, they bring it to us, and we see it, and we get all kinds of new ideas, and so then we clarify what we really meant at what the previous requirements were a gathering session. So it's, again, another iterative process, and so you can kind of see you get down to the bottom and you go back to step one and start again. But that is the process of improving and developing a piece of software. And I know it's been difficult and patients have been tried at times, but it's been a learning experience for all, and so sticking with it is important. Next one. So our initial rollout, we expect that we will spend a lot of time managing expectations. This is a developing product, and with the data sharing and what it is and how to use it, we're going to need to manage expectations around the use of this tool. We will be establishing a commitment to a continuous improvement cycle that will yield the best system possible at the end of the first year. This will require revisiting it, looking at processes and procedures and the use of the system, not just the technical performance, but all of our support stuff that we need to make sure that it's going to be used to maximize the benefit to students. And a data system, I talk about this a lot, a data system is not just a piece of technology. It is about people and processes as well. So we really plan on focusing on not just the technology improvement, but again, the people and processes that will ensure the system is leveraged a way that is as efficient and effective as possible. We plan on providing training on confidentiality to all folks who are going to have access to the student information, and training on the collection of data and the use of the system, and data literacy. The school's data is not the easiest to decipher at times. One of the examples I usually use is event dropout versus cohort dropout rates. They are very different, but oftentimes if you don't know the difference, you'll use them one or the other in the wrong way, and actually use the wrong information to make a decision. So data literacy, that folks know what the data mean, what it's based on, and some of our education speak will be really important. Next. So some of our challenges, funding is always going to be a challenge. There are ways to overcome this, and we can talk a little bit about that if anyone's interested. Most of it is going to be, again, collaboration and partnering, and looking at foundations to support this effort, as well as your community partners who start to see the value and really want to engage with student data. Everyone's got a stake in this, and so we encourage the folks who have a stake to kind of help foot the bill. Overcoming privacy concerns. Everyone is very fearful about FERPA. There's great guidance out there. If anyone hasn't checked out the Privacy Technical Assistance Center around the sharing of data and understanding FERPA, it is a wonderful resource. So again, that's the Privacy Technical Assistance Center. And you can Google that, and it is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Ed. Overcoming fear of accountability. Data can be used for a few reasons. It can be used for good and improving student outcomes, or it can be used as a hammer to beat people over the head with. We really stress that in this way that the schools is sharing data with community partners so that we can provide better services to students. It is not about accountability. Although if it's found that certain programs are not making an impact, we do want to have a culture of continuous improvement. Eventually, if people don't improve and we find that there aren't improvements going on in student achievement, then we would need to look at that. Developing cross-agency processes is always one of a challenge, just developing those, and understanding the data uses. Data for targeted intervention has to be very timely, and it's a proactive approach. Data for performance measurement is different. It usually happens at the end, and it's more about how many you served and not necessarily the impact. And then data for research is always valuable, but definitely happens at the very end of it. Next. So some of our successes. We've engaged funders and other stakeholders with outcome data. The more folks we show the potential of what can be done through data sharing and bouncing program performance off of student achievement outcomes, the more support we seem to be getting. And we're really kind of excited about the potential in the future for how funders might get engaged as well as other program providers. We have extensive collaborative relationships that have developed through this with the Promised Neighborhood, NASA, and other folks in the community. It's really shown us kind of reaching out and that we're not siloed, and we want to engage those community partners in doing the best thing we can for kids. Innovative technology development. What we are doing with Social Solutions, really creating a FERPA-compliant piece of software that will deliver information only after parental consent has been received and verified, and at that point student information flows down, has been an interesting thing and not something that we've seen from other pieces of software. So we're really excited about being part of that innovation. Data sharing MOUs, that is a success. It took us a year, and we did it. Partnership with Social Solutions, again, to create that FERPA-compliant interface. And extending the conversation on the use of data further in the community. It's got to be one of the biggest successes, because the more folks know about where our struggles are, and the more folks know about individual students and how to target interventions to meet their needs, the more success we're going to have. So we're looking forward to extending this beyond even where we are. Next. So what's next for us? We plan on continuing to refine the system, as I said, with a focus on continuous improvement and sharing student program participation data with MNPS. Data sharing doesn't necessarily go just from the school district to community partners. Data sharing partnerships are best when they are a win-win, and often schools and districts would love to have information on the programs that students are participating in. Teachers can often use those programs as resources, as contacts when we really need to look at what might be done with a student. They can be partners for us, so we need information on what kinds of programs students are participating in. Evaluating additional opportunities. We're looking at perhaps looking at this solution and applying it to our community schools effort, which will be engaging lots of partners around specific schools in neighborhoods to create those schools as an anchor, but offering all kinds of wraparound resources for those that attend those school communities. And evaluate other data that can be shared to support student successes. We've got tons and tons of data available to us. It would be very interesting to see, if we're engaging, we can start using different types of data, such as different types of assessments, lots of social emotional factors. Program providers do a great job, and they are experts, a lot of them, in the area of providing social emotional interventions. And so we're looking forward to looking at the ways we can leverage other data to address that. Next. So what does it take to make all this work? And for the sake of time, I'm just going to go down through these quickly. Shared vision for outcomes. It is very important for everyone to be on the same page. And early work in just a shared vision for what are those outcomes that you want for young people will help people know how they can get involved and what focus areas that the school district really needs them to focus on, and how the school district can often provide resources and other things for program providers. It's all based on a shared vision for what we're going to do. So where do you start? A win-win situation, I mentioned that. Data sharing is not one way, and if it is, it won't be sustained. It has to be valuable for both. It takes work on both sides, so both need to benefit. Collaborative culture, don't think I need to say anything more about that one. Knowledge of confidentiality laws, very important. If you screw up and share data in the wrong way and the mistake is big enough, it could be disastrous to your data sharing program and your goals. So really being knowledgeable of those, making sure that all of your program providers who have access to student data know what to do with it and how to secure it, and who to share it with and who not to share it with. And a lot of stuff, parent consent is something that everyone should review, what needs to be in parent consent. Desire to change the status quo. Obviously, if everyone wants to, if we're too afraid to change and move forward, the situation with our students will remain the same. So we all need to just be committed to changing the status quo, and that means doing things differently. Integrated data systems. For sustainability's sake, data systems need to talk to each other, and that's just something that we really need to look at. Investment of time and money. This is not free, and people shouldn't go into this situation expecting that it is. Investment of time and money on both parts. The school district is spending a lot of time and resources to make this data sharing happen, and our program partners are doing the same and investing their time and their money to obtain student data. It isn't a right to have student data. It is a responsibility, and it's something that benefits the organization, so everyone should kind of just help pony up. Quality data is understood. Please make sure data is quality before you share it. There is nothing worse than sharing the wrong information so that folks can make the wrong decisions. It's just very important to make sure we as a school district are providing quality data. If folks question the quality of the data, please talk to the district before you move forward with it. And again, understanding what that data means as far as data literacy is very important. Formal agreement and MOU. That keeps everyone honest. It keeps everyone committed, and is definitely a good thing to have. And patience. It's a learning process, and everyone gets into the what's in it for me part sometimes, which can make the others struggle and maybe feel a little resentment at times. Just know that that's going to happen. Have patience with the other. Be willing to negotiate and try to work out something honestly for the sake of the kids. Okay, and I think that is my last slide. And with that, I will turn it back over to Adrian.
Thanks, Laura. That was fantastic, as usual. We have lots of questions coming in. I'm going to field 4 or 5 now and then leave the remainder for a broader Q&A after Pierre's presentation in a moment. But I'll ask a few here in order to take advantage of their timely and direct nature to your presentation. So the first question is, Laura, I know you've addressed this, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum. And I know also you just referenced a great resource, so I'll have you repeat that again. But can you get a little more specific when you are talking about data sharing between the MNPS data system and Social Solutions ETO, specifically what data is being shared, what can partners see, and can you speak again a little bit about the process you've gone through to ensure that you are FERPA compliant?
Sure.
I know that's a big question, and I'm going to try.
Yeah, let me just kind of step through the process. As far as what information we are sharing from our data warehouse here in the school district, we are sharing demographics, address, name, phone number, ethnicity, and I believe we're sharing even free and reduced lunch status as far as economically disadvantaged status. And that is, again, these have all been laid out. Each individual piece of information that we are sharing with program providers is in a parental consent form. It isn't just a general, you agree to share everything we have about your student. It is actually laid out in detail. We share grades, detailed attendance, daily attendance data, and discipline data in the form of ISS, in-school suspension, and out-of-school suspension counts. We do not share the details of behavior. That is something, if someone has been kicked out of school for 5 days, we expect the program provider will talk to the student or their parent to find out the reasons. We are not going to share those reasons. But we want them to know it's more of a heads up that there's something going wrong. So that data leaves the MNPS data warehouse and enters kind of a black box in the cloud and stays there until a program provider with a parental consent form completed and signed looks for searches in the ETO software for the student. At that point, if it finds the student and there is a parental consent form actually attached to the student record, so anyone can go in, the administrators of the software or myself as an MNPS, if I wanted to audit the parental consent, make sure that was being done, I would be able to literally see the documents because they will be there for my viewing. But after that is all done, then the information will flow down to the provider. So it's really automated, but it ensures that that parental consent has been made. What else didn't I touch on, Adrian, as far as?
No, I think that's perfect. Just the reference, again, to the Privacy Technical Assistance Center and the Data Quality Campaign as two sources of great insight as to what the parameters of FERPA compliance are and how to ensure that you have the resources and tools in place to maintain that compliance.
Yep, definitely. I still use them today, so.
It's a great reference. And just as a detail that I'll offer from Social Solutions perspective, the community-based provider is serving a set of students and sees those student records daily as part of their case management service strategy. If those students are part of the Stratford cluster of schools that Laura highlighted as the target of this data sharing, then those students may be eligible to have this data shared. That the difference between them possibly having data shared and actually having data shared is dependent upon this dual consent strategy that we have essentially operationalized with MNPS Data Warehouse and Social Solutions ETO software. So the data on that student, the student data from Metro Nashville Public Schools only is revealed to the community-based provider where there is a evidence of signed consent on both sides, and that is what we use to sort of manage the transfer of that data. A second question, Laura, this should be an easier one for you. How do you share information on pre-K? Or you mentioned 3,000 young people under the age of 5. Is that at all within the domain of this project?
We would really love to have pre-K data. We have MNPS does have some pre-K classes, and we do have a number of them in the Promise Neighborhood Cluster. Those are the ones that are funded through our Head Start and operated through the school district. They actually are located at our district schools. But there are a lot of other pre-K programs that we don't have data on. But if we have that student, if they are enrolled as a student, even a pre-K student, that information would flow down to the provider, yes.
Great. And again, a little additional detail from Social Solutions perspective. We do that work with LA Universal Preschool throughout Los Angeles, and also work with their Promise Neighborhood community too. So that is relevant in some communities, not necessarily Nashville today. Last question before we move on to Pierre's presentation, Laura, and then take our other questions at the end. Wouldn't a significant percentage of the technology that you've worked with Social Solutions to develop be applicable to other sites? Could another project use what you've started to develop?
Yes. In fact, that was one of the intentions that we had when we engaged in this work. While we're definitely supportive of the Promise Neighborhood, and it would have been valuable just for that. But the Promise Neighborhood folks have been really great in thinking beyond their own boundaries and allowing me to kind of yank them into the bigger world of, so what if other people wanted to do this? We need to make sure that this wasn't just applicable to the way the Promise Neighborhood worked, but that it will work for other initiatives, such as our Community Schools Initiative. We are looking at it and we're considering it, and we've been in discussions, and we'll make a decision based on a lot of factors, but yes, it is designed to be scaled.
Great. Thank you, Laura. I want to acknowledge that there are a number of other questions that continue to be asked in the chat box. We're going to transition now to a brief presentation by Pierre. The pivot point here is that data exchange in support of intelligent decision-making is not just from the schools to the community, as Laura just highlighted, but also from the community back to the schools, which Laura pointed to as hopefully a future expansion of this current project. We also know that through the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, which many folks on the call today may be familiar with, this is somewhat groundbreaking acknowledgement of and permission or allowance for data to be exchanged on at-risk students with local child welfare organizations, essentially through their SACWIS, State-Administered Child Welfare Information System. We're thrilled to have Pierre on the call today, who leads that effort in Nashville. And again, let me remind you that everyone on the call, that the chat box will remain open, so please continue to ask questions. We will revisit those questions once Pierre concludes his portion of today's presentation. Pierre, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here and glad to participate. Go on to the next slide, please. MNPS and DCS has been working for almost 2 years now in doing some data sharing and what we're trying to do is improve student outcomes. We use Metro Schools as a vehicle to implement programs across the state here in Tennessee for what does and does not work. We have a program called TFACS, which is our data collection system, which tells us information about our students, helps us transition students, and we use that as a vehicle of information. And our real goal at DCS, particularly education, is just that, to work as a support with the public school system and to try to improve outcomes for students. In the foster care system in Tennessee, probably 80% of the children we have in custody are attending public schools. And so we feel it's very valuable that we share this information to improve those outcomes. Not just while they're in custody, but we want to take a look at what markers did we see before they came into custody. And so this is what we need to know. For example, in addition to that, nationwide, children in custody and prior to custody move a lot. And we want to know about how these out-of-home placements in school affect school performance. And there's clearly, the research is very, very clear. And if you want to go back and look at some of the research done by Chapin Hall, University of Chicago, has extensive research in this area through NEEKC, another resource you can use. And we also forever have been challenged with the limitations of information that could be shared through FERPA, which, as we were talking about, this is a great opportunity to talk about the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, which we talked about MOUs before and the importance of them. We spent well over a year going with our attorneys back and forth with Metro Schools and with our attorneys with DCS, and we finally established a memorandum of understanding that we were comfortable with at about the same time.
2 days later.
Actually, as Laura stated, 2 days later came the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, which is like, wow, we spent all this time. But the other reason that was really important for us is it really didn't change our obligation as a child welfare organization, DCS, and how and what we could share. But it clearly made it easier for the schools to share information with us. Where is Tennessee today? I'll be very frank with you. A lot of the public school systems do not yet have their arms around what is the implication of the changes to this. Because essentially, for the first time ever, schools can just simply go to a child welfare worker and say, here are the education records. There's absolutely no need anymore for parental consent to access those children while they are in custody. One of the concerns, of course, is, well, how are we going to keep track of when they come and when they go? Because they too have, so they want to make sure they know when those things happen. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. So how does out-of-school placement affect school-age children? We, as I mentioned before, have been working extensively with Chapin Hall, University of Chicago, and HHS on these following questions, okay? Is school change at the time of placement important? And there's absolutely no question about that. There's no question the impact of school changes. In fact, some of the research says for every move that a child makes has an effect of up to 6 months of negative impact in that child's educational or academic progress. How are foster kids performing when they enter school? That's probably as important to me as anything, because what we really want to do with GCS is we want to reduce the number of children that are coming into custody. And so we can work together with school systems in our intervention programs, both ones run by us and the public school system. So we want to see what markers are out there, what indicators are there for a child in the school system before they even enter custody. And what can we do to deal with those markers to decrease the amount of students coming into custody? Another concern of ours is that does this achievement gap become larger or smaller while they're in custody? So not only do we want to reduce the number of children coming into custody, we want to reduce the amount of time that they are in custody, and we want to make sure we're getting maximum performance from us during that time. So we need this data to follow that path. And how do these placement changes affect school performance? No question. Not only just we talked about before custody, what's going on, what are we doing for these children while they're in custody? Again, we also as a child welfare organization have to work diligently to try to maintain placements for our children to the best ability that we can. All right? And then we need to do a better job of transitioning these children out of custody back into the public school system. Okay? Next slide, please. The challenge, exchanging information. And this truly has been a challenge for us in trying to get our different data management systems to talk to each other. It's, to speak as bluntly as possible, has been a real challenge on our end. It's not only do we have to get past the attorneys, and as Laura said, wonderful advice, know exactly what you want to do before you even go to the attorney. Know exactly what your objective is. Know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. It makes it a lot easier for the attorneys to go through that process. There's also always a concern about the effects of school personnel being aware of child being in custody. And it's difficult for us because it seems like we want to have it both ways. You know, we want the schools to give us everything, but sometimes it seems as if the child welfare system is resistant in giving schools what they need. So the attorneys and the memorandums of understanding, or MOUs, it's very, very important that we provide the information that the schools need to provide services without giving any unnecessary information. Again, like we say, the sharing is to improve educational outcomes for children in custody. And one of the things we're trying to do is to limit those moves and to have a smooth transition to and from the schools. Like I say, we do everything we can to maintain educational placement for a child in custody. We try very hard if a child is in school A and is in a foster home, we make every effort to maintain that placement of that child in that same school. It is sometimes not possible because we cannot provide the services the child needs there, but that's the goal that we all have to have, both as educators and as the child welfare system, to try to maintain the continuity in those placements. Okay, what about educational privacy rights, FERPA? Okay, next slide, please. Okay. There's a number of great resources about the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. The Legal Center for Foster Care and Education has got a nice little Q&A that they put together when this first came out. Their website is fostercareandeducation.org. I encourage you to go to that website. I didn't put it down here, but that's fostercareandeducation.org. Okay, so looking at this here, you have the educational institutions or agencies and the child welfare agency. There are all these rules about who you can give and what you can give and what you can share and what you can't. The Uninterrupted Scholars Act, or USA, eliminates the requirement that educational agencies notify parents before educational records can be released. I can say that some of our school districts are hesitant about doing this just because this is a systemic change in how we've done business forever. But basically, as long as the child welfare agency worker can verify this child is in custody, the school has an obligation to release that information as quickly as possible. It does, as I said before, it does not change the rules regarding what and how information can be shared from the child welfare agency to the public schools. Next slide, please. Okay, so where are we today? We are currently sharing demographic information regarding the children in the foster care system from or currently placed in this school system. As I said at the beginning, we use Metro Nashville Public Schools as a vehicle of procedure that we're going to, and putting these systems in place so that we can use the same systems or similar systems across the state as we share data with other agencies, with other school systems in the state. Navigating the implications and implementation of the USA changes to FERPA. Again, as I said, just that systemic change. Having the schools become aware of how information is exchanged, and also teaching our people what that means when they go to school, how they implement the information. Next steps. It has been a wonderful opportunity to verify our information and verify our shared data to make sure that we have accurate information we can share back and forth. Tracking outcomes for student enrollment, grades, credit acquisition, graduation. And again, as I said, determining school triggers to custody. What are we seeing as consistent triggers, consistent markers prior to custody that maybe we can address? We can see what's working and what's not working and what we can change to address those triggers and markers. To determine which, and once we determine what those markers are, to see if we can get some hard data on what interventions have been effective, what programs have been effective. And then streamlining that data sharing, direct access to data from central office to central office, while maintaining that security issue that's always a concern for everybody. We have made some strides, but as Laura was saying, it seems as soon as you get your arms around one concept, they come around with something a little more complicated. But that's extremely important to us, is the confidentiality of the data that we share between central offices. Next slide. Okay. First steps to an effective data sharing agreement. Identify what questions we need to answer. Again, as we shared before the attorneys get their hands on it. So like I say, so we can give clarity as to exactly what our purpose is. What are the average number of school moves prior to custody? again, that's a marker. We are constantly trying to improve our maintaining educational placements while they're in custody, but we're starting to see that there seems to be a real pattern with the children who have had a number of changes prior to custody as a marker we should look at. School moves during the year. What can we do to decrease those things? How long a period of time is there between school moves? In other words, if it's going to have to go from one school to another, how long of a delay is there between the time that child moves from one school to the other? What's the lag time there? Attendance issues. We're watching those things. What intervention programs have been effective? And those are the data sharing things we're working with right now. Next slide, please. That pretty much summarizes what I have to say. Adrian, any follow-up questions?
Thank you, Pierre. Great. And I just wanted to note quickly that we will make sure that the 3 resources that have been mentioned today, the Privacy Technical Assistance Center, Data Quality Campaign, and the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education, will all be provided to folks in follow-up correspondence. Anyone who's on this, who's signed up or registered for this, we will send links to those resources in case you missed the web address that Pierre mentioned. Pierre, let me ask the first question. This appears to be a little bit of a technical question about the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. I have some familiarity with it, so I'll try to support you on this. If you're not sure what the answer is, I'm not sure that either of us can speak and answer this entirely. But the question is, does the Uninterrupted Scholars Act require data sharing only to occur with government agencies, or can nonprofits also receive data, and B, only when a child is in custody? So it's a two-pronged question. Can uninterrupted scholars allow data sharing with community-based nonprofits, and is it only when a child is in custody?
It is my understanding it is to be only shared with educational organizations, not nonprofit or other organizations. Information shared only from educational entities, and it is only while the child is in custody. That is my understanding.
That's my understanding as well, Pierre. So I would not say, and I don't want to speak for you, Pierre, but I don't think either of us present ourselves as the leading expert on the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, but I know each of us have been in webinars where this has been clarified. And the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education, I'm just reading that again for folks who want to look this up and familiarize themselves with the subtleties of this act, provides a tremendous resource for that.
Adrian, there is one gray area. Those are the children who are receiving pre-custodial and post-custodial services. There's a gray area, though, but those children, is my understanding, are not eligible for qualifying under this act.
Great. Great clarification. I also know, Pierre, that there are models in place in California. I know our company supports models focused on what are called differential response strategies, where there are some case-by-case permissions that have been negotiated locally, where efforts are in place to provide data to providers who are serving young people in that gray area. So I appreciate you highlighting that. One other question. Again, this has to do with the subtlety of the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, Pierre, but I think it's relevant. Do you know if the Uninterrupted Scholars Act applies to children in Head Start?
If they are, yes. If a child is in custody, is my understanding, if they're receiving services through the public school system, or if they're being funded by education monies, I believe it is my understanding that, yes, they are eligible to data share for the act. Again, I'm not an attorney and don't play one on TV, so.
Great question. Great response, Pierre. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is I have lots of other more general questions related to the presentations that have been made today. So I'm going to circle back to a more general Q&A. Again, I'll remind folks that there is a chat box in the left-hand corner of your webinar where we are receiving these questions from the community. I'm going to do my best to hit the ones that have been asked so far. And if you don't hear your specific question asked, we are also seeing a lot of redundancy in questions, so we're trying to group them in common. So let me first go to question. I believe this is probably for you, Laura, but you mentioned this as well, Pierre. What agreements were put in place to facilitate data sharing? Laura, you spoke about this, and Pierre, you did as well, but I think maybe it's helpful to revisit. Clearly, that was both of you identified the MOU and MOA process as fundamental first step. Can you speak to some of those specifics?
Yeah, as far as specifics in MOUs, definitely, exactly laying out exactly what data will be shared down to the field level, if possible. And we've done that, especially with the Promised Neighborhood. That one is very comprehensive and even goes into the roles of different people who will have access to the data system. And if there is a breach, what is the process for reporting that? It talks about the destruction of information. So, I will tell you that if you want kind of a detailed outline of what should be included, again, if you look up the Grand Rapids Master Data Sharing Agreement, you'll find everything that has been very thoroughly vetted by legal folks already. Because again, I'm like Pierre, I'm not a lawyer. But we did use resources that already had been through legal review. And then we had our own folks, and we had a wonderful person who was very educated in data sharing, a lawyer in that field, review and vet that. And that was offered by one of the organizations working with the Promised Neighborhood, the policy something or other. But anyway, they were great helping us review those kind of things. The responsibilities under the MOU, who is going to share what and when, how often the data sharing might happen. I was just kind of thinking of some of the things that we put in it. The purpose, one of the things you do need to outline clearly is the purpose of the data sharing. People can't just share data and have it used for whatever they want. If it is for research, it has to be defined. If it is for a specific purpose, it needs to be defined. And when we're looking at parent consent, the parent consent needs to have exactly what you are going to use that information for. You don't just provide it to have someone use it for whatever purpose they decide to use it. In fact, we were very clear with our data sharing with the Promised Neighborhood that it is to be used for actionable purposes, and the primary use is for interventions and targeting interventions for the students who are entering those programs. Secondary is performance measurement, where data for the program itself, which de-identified and aggregate information, can be then used to look at the program performance over time. And lastly, we even addressed research, which is separate and not included in the MOU. The research process is one, and it is defined in the MOU as needing to go through the MNPS Research Assessment and Evaluation Office process, which we talked a lot about because we want the research to be based on valid data and done in a valid way. And if it's going to be published, we want the school district as well as the Promised Neighborhood to both weigh in on what that will look like and how that will happen. So lots of discussion and agreements, but I would separate actionable versus performance measurement for the program and then a research agenda as separate uses, and define how your data sharing agreement will meet those three.
Thank you, Laura. This question has come in from a number of, so I'm going to group a number of questions. They all seem to address this particular issue, and that is, can you speak a little about schools' buy-in and the level of sort of support you received, Laura, from the highest levels in Metro Nashville Public Schools, and then how you helped to secure schools' buy-in at the principal level, and how you helped to negotiate and establish a trusting relationship between community-based providers and the schools, a relationship that often isn't always founded on the most sort of trusting background.
Right. Well, the trust as far as our superintendent goes and interest in sharing data, our superintendent is interested in the best outcomes for students. And if we have community support, like the first slide of my presentation, it is unacceptable for folks who really want to help to not and be willing and even have the money and the resources to help to not know where they fit. We can use their help. We are a struggling urban school district with some really difficult poverty issues that our students need support. Their families need support. And if they come to school more ready to learn, then we can do our job in the school district better. So it's a natural for our superintendent to reach out in the community and say, hey, anybody that wants to help. And if they say, well, we need information on what we can help with, then I've been given the okay from the very beginning to pursue that. There was never really a question because it is a necessary component of having people help us. So that's that. The partnership with the principals and the more on-the-ground stuff, we've been really lucky. Robin Beanstra Vanderweel from our Promise Neighborhood, director of our Promise Neighborhood here in Nashville, really did a great job with the planning resources and the recommendations and best practices that she received through the assistance with the Promise Neighborhood and the USDOE on how to start convening people and what that looked like. The school district was involved very early on. They were approached to say we're going to do a Promise Neighborhood, and this is designed to improve student achievement and make sure our kids are college and career ready and to kind of break the cycle of poverty in that area of town. Principals are all on board with that. So when they said, how are we going to do this, they've been involved on all of the planning committees. They've been involved in the data reviews from the very beginning. In fact, the principals were tasked with bringing some of the data to the table and leading the conversations about what some of those educational problems were. So engaging principals as part of the conversation in partnership with the community providers. Again, it's about collaboration and partnership. The data sharing, the trust that's developed through that process comes naturally, and the data sharing is then built on that trust.
Thank you, Laura. You say that as though it's all easy. You make it sound so easy, and having been working with you on this for many years, I know how hard it's been to paddle, keep this project moving. I will say this, and then I'll ask the next question. Laura, you have underemphasized the importance, I think, of your team. I know that my team, Social Solutions Development Team, has these tools are available to work in other communities, and your team has been exceptionally dedicated and receptive to how to work this. That's not always the case in school districts and their IT staffs around the country, so kudos to you on that. A number of questions have come in about your reference to the importance to strengthen the community's capacity for data literacy and provide workshops and training around how to treat this data. Can you speak to whether you're doing that training yourself, Laura, you and your team, or you've worked with other contractual partners and maybe what that looks like?
I'm very lucky. Again, I was given a person. I have a certificated, she's a former teacher who has done a lot of work in the area of professional learning and is spearheading an effort to develop professional learning around data sharing. And we are considering our community partners in the development of those materials. A lot of our data sharing is fairly new. We knew we needed to get more deliberate about the data literacy part of things and how to use data and engaging in the process of collaborative inquiry, which is the best way to actually solve problems and come up with plans and target your actions in the direction that they need to be, and to do that together. So collaborative inquiry is the process that she is using, and creating kind of a framework to fit our data literacy needs. So be watching out for her to probably publish a book one of these days. But it's really exciting. But yes, we're kind of spearheading that here, but we will be looking for resources in the community, and we're actually holding some of our first workshops with a collaborative inquiry-based model. and it will be held in a couple of weeks with some of our principals and then the program providers for that NASA program. We already are sharing data. Like I said, they're a little farther ahead than the Promised Neighborhood is right now. And so we are going to be getting those two groups together to look at the data for the students. And we anticipate there's going to be some really good conversation between program providers and principals and school staff as they get together and look at their data for the upcoming year to see where program providers can have impact, where principals feel like they need help with which student groups or even with which individual students. So we're real excited about that, but learning about the data will be a part of that work.
Thanks, Laura. It's come up repeatedly. I don't want to get stuck in the acronyms, but I'm sure you're going to sense where this question is coming from. We've made repeated reference to ways you have remained compliant with FERPA requirements in your data exchange strategies. Are you encountering any HIPAA-related data, and can you speak to that? And I'll open that up to both of you, Laura and Pierre.
Yeah, on my end, no. One, and this is kind of an interesting FERPA-HIPAA thing. And honestly, the Privacy Technical Assistance Center has a great document that actually addresses where HIPAA and FERPA meet and where they don't. And it's a great reference, so I would look that up there. But one of the things I discovered is that health records that are created as part of the school services or that are part of the student record are covered under FERPA and not HIPAA. Now, we don't share health data with community partners at this point. It is not something that we've included. I would want to do a lot of legal review before I went down that road. But the early guidance, and that's just something that comes right out of the guiding documents with FERPA, is that if health records are part of the student record, then they are actually covered under FERPA and not HIPAA. But health records at a doctor's office, places like that, are of course HIPAA, and we don't have access to those at all.
We at DCS have some other challenges with that. The Uninterrupted Scholars Act does not affect HIPAA at all. However, our residential treatment children have psychological evaluations that are completed that are often HIPAA protected, and we therefore cannot provide those to the schools. And it does create challenges sometimes with children with disabilities and providing them the schools with documentation they need. So yeah, it does cause some challenges for us sometimes.
Thanks, Pierre. This may be the last group of questions that are coming in, and they're a little technical, so I'm going to actually try and respond to them from my perspective. And Laura, certainly I invite you to contribute as well based on your technical teams working through this. So the question is, essentially, it sounds like you've built a framework that allows data partners to gain access to identified student data through this web-based portal, secure, FERPA compliant. You've covered that. Can you speak to ways that you might accommodate additional data over time? Essentially, does the framework that we've created with you allow just this data to be exchanged, or is it built in a way that it will allow other data to be exchanged? And will the framework accommodate other data partners as you invite them to participate?
Yeah, I would go ahead and let you answer that since it's mostly about the capability of the software part of it.
I didn't want to steamroll that, but there's three questions that are coming in regularly. They are, is it just set up for this data set? The answer is no. The tool set that we've built with Metro Nashville Public Schools is built to accommodate whatever data elements that the MOUs and MOAs that Metro Nashville Public Schools negotiates as being shared among its partners for its identified student data. So the data portal can be set to accommodate any data that's mutually agreed upon between partners. The second point is that the portal is web-based, so it allows authorized access from any number of partners. So all you have to have is a student you have to be serving a student who is in Metro Nashville Public Schools, or in this case the Stratford cluster of schools in this pilot project. But there's no limitation. Metro Nashville Public Schools can allow another data partner to join and have access to the student-identified data for the clients and young people they're serving. So that limitation is acceptable. And then the last question that's come in twice is the data file formats. I'll speak to that a little, and Laura, throw that back out to you, and that is there, the way this is accommodated, it's essentially a secure file transfer protocol. This is a little bit of a technical term, but MNPS drops the data that's been agreed upon into a flat file. It goes into what Laura, I think, rightly and appropriately referred to as a black box based on a consent trigger at Metro Nashville Public Schools. Then Social Solutions gains authorized access to that student's black box data based on a consent that the community-based organization has on file with Social Solutions through ETO software. So the questions about does this work across other systems, et cetera, any systems that can accommodate a flat file, essentially a text-delimited, comma-delimited Excel-style form, which virtually any interoperable tool sets can today, this framework can be set up to allow the exchange of data that hopefully creates an environment where organizations, community-based organizations, can demonstrate correlation between the services they deliver and achievements that the young people are seeing, academic achievements that the young people are seeing. This is ultimately built on the longitudinal database that Promise Neighborhoods and other communities are using to track this change in condition over time. So I apologize for those of you on the call for whom the technology is of little interest. There have been probably no less than 6 different questions that have come in related to specific technology questions. Laura, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that based on what you and your team have been doing behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's actually been, once we knew what data we were going to send over, it really is just a matter of setting up the file that is actually then exported. It will be exported nightly, automated. So, on our end, we need to set up an automated generation of this file. I wouldn't recommend doing it manually unless you don't need to update that often, but we are planning on updating nightly. So we'll have an automatic, like Adrian said, a flat file that will be sent to this secure FTP, and that's our part of it. And so if we were to incorporate additional data, we would then need to look at what it would take for Social Solutions to basically expand their end, because it really is about their receiving the data. We can just add more columns to our export and export more data. Of course, one of the areas I will comment on that we chose not to immediately export was assessment data. It's very complicated. So while we make it sound pretty simple, there are some aspects of the data that need to be considered. When you're looking at assessment data with various strands and cut points and things like this that may even change over time, it can be difficult to analyze assessment data. We've chosen to hold off on that until we get the technology and everything right. Then we may end up pursuing sending out some more of the formative benchmark assessments that happen throughout the year to kind of give people an idea of how students are progressing through the year relative to the state test prep. We're going to review that, but again, we're going to Common Core, so we're going to be changing assessment standards anyway, so we just thought now was not a good time to really pursue assessment data. But again, it's complicated, and we'll have to map all that out and look at how we send it and then how ETO would receive it and process it to make sure that the way it left is the way it arrives and the way it's processed is the way it should be processed.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate you highlighting. You've said it repeatedly, and it's always pleasant to hear again that your assessment of the level of effort on your side, which is moderate to minimal, and I mean from the actual technical piece after all these politics and process pieces were put in place. Again, I'm not trying to minimize all the great work you do, but you're always great about reminding us or saying out loud, once we got all of that in place, actually executing on this plan was not that labor intensive.
Yeah, and I certainly want to, don't want to underestimate my technical team's attendance in the planning of this, and they are amazing. I'll give a shout out to Jennifer Lee. She is incredible and does accommodate meetings and has attended just to kind of keep an ear out to make sure that what we're sending, it's being received and processed in a way that will deliver it to our program providers the right way. So she's been involved in the process. But yes, technically on our end, that hasn't been the challenge. It's really developing your end that we've been participating in that's been the timely part. So
great. Folks, we were scheduled to conclude here at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific, and other hours in between as you move across the time zones. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura and Pierre, your insights, your leadership, both at the thought leadership level and the practice leadership level, even more importantly, being able to execute on this plan. There isn't a community in the country that doesn't acknowledge the importance of many of the principles that you've laid out today that drive their work, but you are certainly in rarefied air as far as having actually moved in this direction, developed these interoperable frameworks, and driven toward this Rapid+Time data exchange for decision making. So kudos to you and your work. Thank you for bringing that intelligence to bear for us in this webinar. There are a series of questions that have been asked today. We will put together the FAQ that will highlight the questions that were answered and provide, the questions that were asked and the answers that were provided. We have a number of web-based links that were mentioned today that we will include in a send-around to attendees. We'll also make sure that this webinar is published and made available to folks directly as well as through our mutual websites. And as a last comment, I want to ask folks if you would please, at the conclusion of this webinar, please take a moment, less than a minute, I think, to complete the survey that pops up on your screen. APHSA, Metro Nashville Public Schools, Tennessee Children's Services, Peers Group, and Social Solutions benefit significantly when we hear feedback from the community on these webinars. So please take a moment and provide us with some brief feedback. And then if there's any particular questions that anyone wants to reach out to us directly, you'll have our contact information in the published version of this webinar that will be sent around again and posted accordingly. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a privilege speaking with you and representing the team. Thank you to APHSA for supporting and sponsoring this webinar. Again, to Laura and Pierre from Metro Nashville Public Schools and Tennessee Department of Children's Services, and from Social Solutions. Have a great afternoon.